Hello again, this is Pick, and welcome back to my developer commentary of Integration by Parts presented by FTB. Today I'm primarily going to focus on tech mods, as I plan to move everything into the new base and get a sorting system going to sort items. The first thing to make today is a compressor, which can process ores, create industrial grade metal for less steel, and make carbon plates. By throwing the dirty aluminum dust into a compressor, it turns into clumps, which can be smelted into 2 ingots each. Do note that aluminum, nickel, and some other ores follow this separate processing chain instead of the regular macerating chain that iron follows. So, this is the new base that I've been working on between episodes. It's nowhere near done, but I couldn't stand living in a yard sale any longer. The block duplicator makes obtaining materials very easy, so it's very nice to have. The first item on the list today is a new tugboat. This one runs off of redstone flux as opposed to coal, also known as forge energy if you aren't a modded boomer like I am. Before I work with the tug itself, I'd like to set up the collection tank on the dock. For just a lot of iron plates and some treated wood, you too can hold 512 buckets of whatever you'd like. These currently greatly outclass the mechanism tanks for situations where you want to hold a large volume of something without moving it very far. The structure itself is 5 blocks tall, so I messed it up the first time. I have plenty of those multi-block capsules, and yet I'm not using them for some reason. You've seen me set up a tug dock before. The only difference this time is the vessel charger placed on top of it. I'll eventually get a more permanent setup, but this will be sufficient for the time being. And naturally, to collect fluids from the world, I'll need a pump. The immersive engineering pump replaces fluids it picks up with cobblestone to minimize lag. I'm just going to power it with a medium voltage capacitor since it takes very little juice to run. I never did say what I was going to collect, did I? This will be a lava pump. Ideally, I would set this up over one of those absurdly large quark lava caves, but a large ravine underneath the ocean will do just fine. The tug can chunk load, and the pump will fill up the buffer for the duration of the tug going to and away from the pump site. The reason it's under an ocean is so that the tug can easily retrieve it. I'm sure there's a better way to do this, but the fluid cell was the only way to extract lava from the fluid hopper that I found to be functional, which was strange since other pipes pumped into it fine. And as you can see, Tankathy brought the lava to its destination. Not too far away, and if it were further I would attach more fluid barges to make up for the travel time. Normally I find lava power to be very boring, but since this had some setup to it, I consider it interesting enough to use. Now that I can upgrade the basic generator to a geothermal generator, it will be what keeps Tankathy running on electric power. Fluids are also more efficient when producing power in most cases than solid fuels, as it consumes only a little at a time. I'd like to use exclusively lava for this industrial contraption's power, as I have other plans for making redstone flux. This will require some more geothermals later, but it'll do the job. Speaking of RF power, I prepared everything in advance this time as this setup is a bit complicated. Remember the peat engine I made before but didn't use? This is where I'll automatically produce peat. This is going to be divided into modules for easier understanding and to make it a little cleaner. The first module is going to produce sand. Sand is made when lava and liquid starlight touch, and since it's sand, it breaks when it falls onto things that can be walked through like torches. So, essentially, this is a modified cobblestone generator. Because I just want enough sand to keep up with bog earth production, this design is inefficient and loses some of the sand to lava. However, since the hoppers can't keep up, there ends up being a bit of an overflow before the comparator controlling the system turns it off. Since the stack size is so small, this is ideal. The piston is going to turn the sand generator off if more than about 3 stacks of sand are in the chest. It also produces aquamarine shale, which will get filtered out. The finished sand generator looks like this. Now I can move on to the second module, which produces the bog earth. I used an assembler from Immersive Engineering to craft the bog earth, as it can handle recursive recipes. A sink will provide it with infinite water. But wait, I hear you say, I don't have dirt production yet. I don't need it. When you break peat bog, it produces 4 peat and 1 dirt. This means that the cycle actually produces a surplus of dirt at the cost of sand, which I can feed back into the system. I also use a comparator on one of the redstone ports on the assembler to turn off the sand input if too much goes into it. Some item pipes connect everything together, and a drawer goes on the back to store extra bog earth. The pipe here has an upgrade that lets me give it redstone sensitivity, hence the ability to turn the extraction off. This is so the assembler doesn't get flooded with sand and have too much to make room for the dirt. The third module is the most complex. It needs to evenly distribute dirt between 3 block placers, use a pure daisy to convert the bog earth into peat bog, break the peat bog to harvest the peat, and collect both drops. Sounds hard, right? It isn't as hard as you'd think. The breaking mechanism is the only tough part, which will require a sensor to determine when the bog earth is converted. This fires a redstone mana spreader with a bore lens, which will cause the peat to drop in the ender hopper to pick it up. To make mana, I used an endo flame running off of the peat that the system generates in the first place. If you have any questions, let me know. I know this is a bit much. Also, I'm aware of the mistake I made with the mana spreader with the pressure plate being right next to it. It's the same mistake I made last time. For the finishing touches, everything just has to be linked up with some item pipes. Some void upgrades on the drawers would be preferable, but for now I don't need them. As a bonus, the peat can be used to generate mana to power the system, or just in general for things like the mana enchanter. The peat engine is now placed down, and unfortunately I already have to modify the system. The ash the system produces is going to feed into a carpenter to make bituminous peat, which increases the amount of power generated to double what it was. While useful, I just need to reroute some of the piping, which isn't too hard. And of course, the entry point for power into the base needs to look somewhat nice. The easiest option is to just use some medium voltage capacitors, as they're pretty cheap at this point in the game. This also gives me a real reason to start moving all the machines over to the new base, as the power infrastructure makes that a lot easier. I'd also like to talk about making these videos for a moment. I've been trying different ways of editing, and hopefully I'll find something that lets me make them faster. Part of it is just adjusting to recording, but I'm experimenting with recording less if I know nothing important is going to happen. It means less footage to sift through. We'll see how things go, I guess. Now that we're getting into more setups than crafting, I'll have longer segments of things to talk about, like the peat engine setup. I think that's more enjoyable to watch since it's more than just crafting and time-lapse. Just to show it, I finally got around to fixing the redstone on the mana pool for the setup with the peat generator. That last clip is an example of what happens when I ad-lib, by the way, and that was a good take. Believe me, it's very difficult when I have to come up with words on the spot. You're gonna get a lot of ums, otherwise I would be able to make these faster. I also slowly add to the build over time. You'll see it progress for the rest of the episode, and in future ones most likely. Setting up the carpenter here wasn't all too fancy. You can clearly see that I just moved some pipes around. The fluid input is full of creosote I've been making over the past while, but I have a permanent solution planned for next episode. Since each peat burns into 1 ash and 1 ash makes 1 peat, it can cycle just like the dirt. Pipe upgrades allow for not just redstone, but round robin too, so this setup is expandable. Since I'm moving machines and setting them up on more permanent power, now's a good time to mention the issue with masterful machinery that a lot of people have been having. The machines kinda drain power constantly, likely due to some bug, but only from some power sources. If you noticed before, the Furnator worked fine, but if you attach an immersive engineering wire to a pipe's pipe, it won't drain. I haven't tested what else avoids this issue, but at least this functions as intended. It isn't a set power drain either, it'll just void energy, which is really painful and I'm not really sure what to do about it right now. A battery box and 2 geothermal generators should hold these machines off for the rest of the early game. I can always make more when I feel more comfortable with the amount of materials I have, but this was what the lava collection was for in the first place and why we set up Tankathy over there. This ore processing setup is familiar to just about anyone that's played with a tech mod before. Grinding on one machine, smelting on the other, and a pipe connecting the two. A true classic, if I do say so myself. 4 tripling isn't as far away as you might think, but I'm okay with this for the time being. Next episode I hope to get some quarrying set up, and by that point resources should be much less of a concern. Since steel demands are going to increase, now's a good time to make an improved blast furnace. This takes power into the 2 preheaters, as well as 27 steel plates and a hopper to craft, but it's well worth it. You'll see where I plan on getting fuel for it in the next episode. The next thing on today's agenda is a simple storage network, or at least it was going to be. I am going to tackle logistics, but... Note that I did record a fair bit involving this mod. Unfortunately, I ended up encountering issues with the filtering system I wanted to make. So, after all that crafting for simple storage network, what happened? Well, it turns out that it's kinda destructively buggy, and I've gotten reports for lag about it, and its limitations for what I wanted to do aren't great either. This results in 2 changes. First, simple storage network is being replaced with pretty pipes. More on that after the actual update that adds it. I'm using a half-breed where I updated scripts to make the second change possible. Logistical transporters and sorters from Mechanism are now available much earlier than they were. How much earlier, you ask? Well, they require nothing more than copper plates and glass. That's it. This gives you guys an extra basic pipe option as well. Pipes, that's pipes with a Z, still have upgrade capabilities and give more per craft than the Mechanism pipes, but for basic stuff this should help. It also reduces the nickel woes people have had to a degree. They also have a fancy new texture to match them to their new material. Anyway, after messing around, I decided to just make a clear-cut mini tutorial for using logistical sorters. Logistical sorters have 4 sorting options and a priority system. The first filtering option is item stack. This is the simplest one, as it only looks for, well, the item you filter. It's very specific. If you put in cobblestone, it will only send cobblestone. This is better for smaller scale setups. The second one is much more applicable for my uses. Tags use the Minecraft tag system to sort by a broad yet related category. For example, the tag forge ingots will include iron, copper, lead, and any other ingot. This will be the first thing that I have access to on the route, as I want anything contained in the drawers to go to the drawers. Note that you need to set a color for your filtering. Shift right click with the configurator on the middle of a pipe to change its color along a set list. A right click will tell you what color the pipe is. Then match the sorter's color in the configuration to the color you want. In this case I chose black. The third sorting option is material. Material is more useful than it sounds. It picks a filter based on the material of the block you provide. It only works for blocks though. This includes stone, wood, glass, and other stuff. If you remember my previous organization of stuff, or maybe you don't, I don't know how much I showed it, it has a chest for basic stone and wooden blocks, so this is a very helpful tag for me. The last option is by mod ID. This is a nice catch for mods that have particular crafting components or items like Botania or Powa. Of course, you can use any number of color filters you want for any given inventory. For example, I can make Powa and Thermal share a barrel on the Aqua channel. In addition, if you don't know the mod ID, you can always click the item into the slot and it will auto-register the mod ID for you. The last thing of note is the order in which things are sorted. You can use the arrows to move filters up or down as you please, and that will determine the priority of that destination. Typically, I would do them in the order you see on the sorter's GUI, as it generally encapsulates things in the order you'd want them, though sometimes you might want a mod ID to go above material. Also, to separate pipes, shift right click the connection a few times until they disconnect. I'll now cut until I'm finished setting this up. Now that that's done, I finally have the sorting system I wanted. I wish these types of logistics systems didn't get pushed to the wayside so often in favor of full central access like refined storage, applied energistics, and pretty pipes. But I think the options you have here are pretty good without completely ruining what players want by having their refined storage that gives them everything at once. I suppose that's enough stuff for one episode. A good deal of infrastructure was made, which a lot of people skip because they want to get right to a particular thing they're rushing. Rushing here isn't my playstyle, as I'd like to enjoy everything I added to the pack, but of course you should play the game how you want to. I'm just here to provide my insight. With that, this has been Pick. I'm glad to have seen you, and I hope to see you again.